Greetings and welcome, everyone. Today is the 11th of November, 2023. Michael and I are joined here on Skype, and we will possibly get this video even up today. And we are going to touch on a topic that we have wanted to touch on for years, actually. And this is a term. It's called Ultramontanism. And it has to do with the Ultramontane. And the Ultramontane are those that we are going to learn about in the reading. So I want to welcome everyone that is within the listening vicinity of the Brett Norman YouTube channel and Michael's channel as well, MK2000, was it, Michael?
MK 2007, but I think that I have to come up with a separate or different title because nobody can.
No worries, Michael. It is what it is, and you had started your channel on the premise of more music oriented things, I assume, right?
Yes, I did some extended mixes of stuff, and then later on I was just torn into all this biblical research, and I just then met Jörg and you and so many other people and Daryl, and yeah, so the channel remains at that name, but now I'm invited on your channel, and I'm not doing my script, but we are doing something that is just heavy on your heart for weeks or months.
Or years, yeah.
For years, and it's a good thing. But first, let me please apologize because we have thought about to make the session today because I'm not too lazy, but I'm really occupied at the moment.
Yeah,
because
you may as well tell everyone that you're doing German recordings of Bruce Lee now and putting them up on your channel, and that we're going to delay the Bruce Lee sessions for a couple weeks, I think, until we get caught up with your German sessions, so Michael can have them come out at the same pace. So we're just going to do some current topics and actually historical topics in the meantime. And Ultramontanism is something that actually makes a lot of sense, but is way under the radar, and I think something that most people would find very boring, Michael. Just bored to death. Well, do I have to learn? This is too much information. I don't need to know this. Well, I'm sorry, but you do need to know this because politics revolves around Catholicism. What is Catholicism? It's the universal aspect of life. Okay? It's kind of like paganism, okay? Because paganism is just universal. I mean, you're born into paganism. You become pagan unless you find Christ and become born again, or you find a different religion. But, this is the natural state of the world. And we're told that, the universe is millions, possibly billions of years old, and you'll never know for sure. But the Bible simply says the genealogy that preceded Jesus Christ. And when you add it all up, you're looking at about 6,000 years. And quite frankly, Michael, I like simplicity, and I like to simplify things. And if I'm a Bible believer, I'm going that route. Go ahead. Yes, you were going to say something?
Yeah, first of all, let me just tell you that these Bruce Lee sessions only will be postponed for a fortnight, so for 14 days.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so that's not that much, and we will provide you with a trailer also. So we will be in full esteem in 14 days because I have prepared more than 30 videos in English. I have to prepare 30 more videos in German, and there is also a bonus of several sessions when it comes down to American history of more than 20 sessions, so you can't imagine that you will have a fresh new session every week until then to summer 2024, as long as we can do this on this YouTube platform. Then you will have that broad picture. I think that you will never ask for any more sessions again. That I will really like to promise, or really like to foresee all the things that we not have to talk about it anymore, because then everything is totally clear that it's all being controlled. But going back here to Ultramontanism, I think, first of all, it's very key to have that understanding what Ultramontanism actually is. And I do not know if this provides a small or a very comprehensible explanation, because I have looked it up on Wikipedia. Would you like to take over then?
Yeah. What's that? You have it on Wikipedia, Michael, right now?
Yeah, because Ultramontanism means over the mountains, actually. Yeah.
Well, so we're going to go into that. It's right in here.
I thought so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me. Yeah. Okay. Then please take over.
It's right in here, and this is the thing, Michael. I want to apologize to our listeners that we haven't been doing any sessions like this for a very long time, a very, very long time, because, quite frankly, we had a bit of a crisis on my channel, and I haven't talked about it much because it's a personal thing between researchers, and I think you know who you are, and we don't need to go into it. But I just wanted to apologize that I have not been doing any content like this for a very long time, because I've been kind of stuck, and I've also been kind of disgusted. And I'd rather not even go into those details. Michael knows what they are, and the rest of you probably know what it is, and that's fine, and let's just leave it at that. But Ultramontanism is a very interesting topic, and I think those that have been raised in the Catholic Church, in the Catholic faith, and also in other denominations such as the Lutheran faith, maybe even all the other faiths, we've all been quite deceived by how we've been taught what different doctrine is, and what we've been indoctrinated is what I'm trying to say, Michael. And it hurts a lot to find out that you've been lied to in this way, and it's a painful process of trying to rebuild simplicity and gain an understanding. And I want to apologize to those researchers out there that I may have offended in the past. And, whether you accept or deny the apology is your choice. But the thing of it is that I think we can move on from there and know that we've all been suffering in some form with our own ignorance and our own shortcomings, and basically comes down to this, that we're not supposed to glorify ourselves. We're not supposed to trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. And I've held that for a long time, and the way I understand that is that we might have a different viewpoint today than we did yesterday. And you see, we're like people walking across a river on slippery rocks, and sometimes we slip on the rock and fall into the water, and we get wet, and it's cold and painful. So hey, I'm no different than anyone else here. There is no hierarchy as far as I'm concerned. We're all on the same level. So that's that. And let's move on. The topic is Ultramontanism. And I'm going to just start reading, Michael. And when you have a comment, just come in and say comment.
Okay.
And is there anything you'd like to say before we continue with what I
No, I just want you to be in the flow. So please continue.
All right, so Ultramontanism, of course, it's Latin, ultra, beyond. It's, of course, I'm not even going to try and read Latin because I'll fumble all over the place. The mountains, yes, beyond the mountains, the name given to a certain school of opinion. Oh, interesting, here comes dogma. Opinion is dogma. In the Roman Catholic Church. The expression Ultramontane was originally no more than a term of locality, characterizing the persons so described as living or derived from, quote, beyond the mountains, unquote. The quote-unquote mountains in this case are the Alps. So that, from the Italian standpoint, Germans and French, for instance, were ultramontane. In the sense, the word was applied in the latter Middle Ages to the Germans studying at the Italian universities, and to take particular example to the French cardinals at the election of Clement V in 1305. North of the Alps, however, the term seems never to have been restricted to the sense implying locality, for from the very beginning we find it used as a party appellation to describe those who looked, quote unquote, beyond the mountains in order to obtain lead from Rome, who represented the papal point of view and supported the papal policy. Thus, as early as the 11th century, the partisans of Gregory VII were styled Ultramontanes, and from the 15th century onward, the same name was given to the opponents of the Gallican movement in France. It was not until the 19th century that quote-unquote ultramontane and quote-unquote ultramontanism came into the general use as broad designations covering the characteristics of particular personalities, measures, and phenomena within the Roman Catholic Church. At the present time, they are applied to a tendency representing a definite form of Catholicism within that church. And this tendency, in spite of the individual forms it has assumed in different countries, everywhere displays the same essential features and pursues the same ends. It follows, to be sure, from the very nature of Ultramontanism and from the important position to which it has attained, the official organization of the church and of the people interested, the official organs of the church and the people interested in the continuance of the actual state of affairs deny that it exists at all as an independent tendency, and to seek identity it with any proper interpretation of Roman Catholicism. Okay, that was a little snaky to get through. I think I need to read that again. Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, this is a tough one here. All right, so it was not until the 19th century that ultramontane and ultramontanism came into the general use as broad designations covering the characteristics of particular personalities, measures, and phenomena within the Roman Catholic Church. At the present time, they are applied to a tendency representing a definitive form of Catholicism within the Church, the Roman Catholic Church. And this tendency, in spite of the individual forms it has assumed in different countries, everywhere displays the same essential features and pursues the same ends. It follows, to be sure, from the very nature of Ultramontanism and from the important position to which it has attained, that the official organs of the Church and all the people interested in the continuance of the actual state of affairs deny that it exists at all as an independent tendency. Okay, so we're in denial here. You Americans, you Europeans, you wherever you live, we're all in denial of this. We should not be ignorant of what the Ultramontane is, because it is the continuance. You see. All right, so this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this recording, because we have this this huge swath of people in the United States that are so convinced that Donald Trump is the savior of the United States. I mean, this is beyond pathetic if you just simply go to the Al Smith dinner and listen to what he said when he was running for president against Hillary Clinton. I know they both suck, but I'm sorry. You know, this is the state of affairs in America, and it's not changed. They're talking about Trump going back to run for re-election. I mean, against the current president. I mean, this is just, it doesn't change. I mean, this is where we're at. I mean, how can this be happening? I don't know. It's just beyond stupid, I think, Michael. But, you know, this is where it leads to, you know. So I'll continue. It follows, to be sure, from the very nature of Ultramontanism and from the important position to which it has attained, that the official organs of the Church and all the people interested in the continuance of the actual state of affairs deny that it exists, and that all, as an independent tendency, and seek to identify it with any proper interpretation of Roman Catholicism. Numerous Catholics, on the other hand, well qualified to form a judgment themselves, protest against its obliteration of the dividing line. It is indisputably legitimate to speak of Ultramontanism as a distinct policy, but it is very difficult to define its essential character. For true it is nature, it has itself drawn up no complete program of its objects, and in addition to its avowed aims, its subsidiary effects claim attention. There is something chameleon-like in its appearances. Its genuine views are kept in the background from tactical considerations, and first one aspect, then another comes into prominence. It is evident, therefore, that the request for a definition of Ultramontanism cannot be answered with a concise formula, but that a varied character of its manifestations necessitates a more detailed examination of its particular objects. The indications given by the late Franz Xaver Kraus, himself a Catholic, may well serve for a guide. He classes Ultramontane 1, whoever places the idea of the Church above that of religion. 2, whoever confounds the Pope with the Church. 3, whoever believes that the kingdom of heaven is of this world and maintains with medieval Catholicism that the power of the keys conferred on Peter includes secular jurisdiction over princes and nations. 4, whoever holds that religious conviction can be imposed by material force or may legitimately be crushed by it. 5, whoever is always ready to sacrifice a clear injunction of his own conscience to the claims of an alien authority. The first fundamental characteristic of Ultramontanism is its championship of a logical carrying out of the so-called, quote-unquote, papalistic system. The concentration, that is, of all ecclesiastical power in the person of the Roman bishop. Okay, we're speaking of the hierarchy here. This is what is commonly referred to as the shadow government, as far as I'm concerned. The shadow government is Roman Catholicism. Sorry to say. The Bible makes it perfectly clear. We've studied it enough, and those of you that haven't, you should study more, specifically the book of Revelation.
Yeah, when you talk about the book of Revelation, Brad, you could also mention then Revelation 9:11, the angel of the abyss. So what is the deep state then other than the audience to the angel of the abyss?
There we
go. Or
the
servants.
It's simplicity. It's so simple. The question is infallibility. Who is infallible? I've always maintained the scriptures are infallible. But of course, there's those researchers out there that keep arguing about which Bible. Well, that's for you to decide, not me. I've made my decision. It's public. Everyone knows. I stick with the King James Bible, and I'm not that particularly interested in going into any discussions about it. It's simple. Let's keep it simple, stupid. This tendency among occupants of the Romans, or the Roman see, to exalt themselves above other bishops and to usurp the part of a superior authority as compared with them, may be traced to even in antiquity. Oh, yes. No later than the end of the 2nd century, Bishop Victor made an attempt to establish his position, or this position, during the discussions regarding the date of the Easter festival. Oh boy. The Easter festival. You know, it's interesting, Michael, when you take a look at a book by trying to remember the name now.
You mean Alexander Hislop, maybe?
Yes, correct. The Two Babylons. And just take a look what that book has to say about Easter or Ishtar. It's pretty simple, actually. But the problem is we have lots of people in denial because they've been taught falsely, Michael, including myself. So I don't blame for people for getting angry about this, because I was pretty upset too when I found out. But, it doesn't mean that you should continue doing the abomination of worshiping, a false, worshiping falsely, let's say, because really Easter has nothing to do with the scriptures, as far as I'm concerned, other than to mark a pagan festival. But anyway, okay, so let's get back to it here. No later than the end of the 2nd century, Bishop Victor made an attempt to establish this position during the discussions regarding the date of the Easter festival, but he met with a sharp rebuff, and Bishop Stephen fared no better when, in the middle of the 3rd century, he came into collision with the Cyprian of Carthage and Firmilian of Caesarea in the dispute concerning heretical baptism. How the Roman bishopric rose in status till it became the papacy, how the individual popes, in spite of these and similar repulses, advanced steadily on their path, how they succeeded in founding their primacy within the church and in reestablishing and maintaining that primacy notwithstanding severe defeats and long periods in which their prestige sank to the vanishing point. It is elsewhere, see papacy, a characteristic peculiarity of the process is that the claims of the Roman See were always in advance of the actual facts and always encountered opposition, though there were many periods at the height of the Middle Ages, for instance, when the voices raised in protest were only timid and hesitating. To the curial system, so evolved and continually fortifying its position in the domains of theology, ecclesiastical law, and politics. Yes, read that right, theology, which is mainly philosophy, not the Bible. Ecclesiastical law and politics, the episcopal system stands in diametric opposition. This system admits that the Pope represents the unity of the Church and acknowledges his primacy, but only in the sense that he is primus inter pares. Oh boy, more Latin. Help me out, Michael. What is that? Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah. Primus inter pares means the first among others.
Ah, thank you.
Or the first among equal, I think it is.
First among equals, thank you.
Yeah.
While at the same time it claims on behalf of all bishops, or behalf of the bishops, that in virtue of the divine ordinance, they possess an inalienable right to share in the government of the church. See episcopacy. This theory of the independence of the episcopate with regard to the Roman bishop was first propounded by Cyprian in his treatise, and here goes the Latin again, which I can't read, De Unitate Ecclesiae. In the 15th century, it received its classical expression in the resolutions of the Ecumenical Council at Constance. Its principles were developed and amplified by Gallicanism, and finally, in the 18th century, was restored in a modernized form by quote-unquote Frobonius, Nicholas von Hotheim, in the pronunciation of M's. See Febronianism. Okay, the struggle between these two systems continued well into the 19th century, and through Episcopalianism was not infrequently proscribed by the Curia till it survived until the year 1870, interesting year, could boast that no ecumenical council had ventured to condemn it. This was done for the first time in 1870 at Vatican Council. Yes, the First Vatican Council was actually December of 1869 it started, whose decrees recognizing the universal reset here. This was done for the first time in 1870 at the Vatican Council, whose decrees recognizing the universal episcopate and the infallibility of the Pope marked the triumph of the Ultramontane doctrine, by which they had been long anticipated. Yes, in 1865, Dollinger wrote, quote, "The Ultramontane view can be summarized in a single concise and luminous proposition, but out of this proposition are evolved a doctrine and a view that embrace not merely religion and the church, but science and the state, politics, morals, and the social order, in a word, the whole intellectual life of men and nations. The proposition runs, the Pope is the supreme, the infallible, and consequently the sole authority in all concerns religion, the church, and morality, and each of his utterances on these topics demands unconditional submission internal no less than external, unquote. History since the Vatican Council has shown this judgment to have been correct. The Roman Catholic Church in all countries has become more and more dependent on the Curia. The bishops have lost their autonomous standing, and their position is little more than of papal delegates, while all important questions are referred to Rome or settled by nuncios. A second peculiarity of Ultramontanism is its confusion of religion with politics. It claims for the Roman Catholic Church the functions of political power and asserts it is the study of the secular state to carry out its instructions and wishes. Ultramontanism regards the state not as divinely established order, but, like its ancient prototype, as a profane institution, and, for that reason, not coordinate with, but subordinate to the Church. The conditions of the age no longer allow the Pope to depose a temporal sovereign. The particular application, the practical application of this conception is, let me start that sentence again. I'm sorry, I really butchered it. Since the conditions of the age no longer allow the Pope to depose a temporal sovereign, the practical application of this conception with the relationship between the spiritual and temporal powers has taken other forms, all of which, however, clearly show that the superiority of the Church over the state is assumed. This may be seen in the attitude of Ultramontanism towards the secular law. It assumes that God is conferred on the individual and on society certain rights and competences as inalienable possessions. This quote-unquote natural law ranks above all secular law, and all state legislation is binding only in so far as it is in harmony with that law. As to the provisions of this natural law and the consequences they entail in individual cases, these can be decided only by the Church, i.e., the last resort by the Pope. This is to assert the principle of individuality of all legislation conflicting with ecclesiastical interests and rules. This was the attitude of Innocent III when he annulled the English Magna Charta, of Innocent X when he pronounced the treaty with Westphalia null and void, of Pius IX when he condemned the Austrian Constitution in 1868, and the ecclesiastical laws of Prussia so far as they affected the circumstances of the Roman Catholic Church, 1875. Thus, too, even at the present time, the opinion, this is a 1911 document here. This is the 1911 Britannica article, okay? You can look this up on the internet. Thus, too, even at this present time, the opinion is very clearly expressed in the ultramontane quarters that in the event of the state issuing laws contravening those of nature or of the Church, obedience must be refused. The attitude of Ultramontanism, for instance, towards the right claimed and exercised by the state to make laws concerning marriage is wholly negative, for it recognizes no marriage laws except those of the Church. The Church alone being regarded as competent to decide what impediments are a bar to marriage and to exercise jurisdiction over such cases. Thus, Ultramontanism disclaims any moral subjection to secular authority or law and will recognize the state only insofar as it conforms its rules to those of the church. An instance of this interference with the duties of the individual citizen towards the state may be found in the fact that, till the year 1904, the Catholics of Italy were prohibited by the Pope from taking part in any preliminary election. Since Ultramontanism can hope to realize its political ambitions, since Ultramontanism cannot hope to realize its political ambitions unless it succeeds in controlling the intellectual and religious life of Catholic Christendom, it attempts to extend its sphere of influence in all directions over culture, science, education, literature, and the forms taken by devotion. Bam! Michael, what do you think of that statement?
Yeah, you see that I was totally awake when you were just reading science, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. In other words, this is just a Jesuitical ratio studiorum.
Yeah, right.
Ratio.
Exactly.
Ratio.
Yeah, it's I think ratio studiorum means judgment, study of judgment, is it?
I would have to look it up because
I'm
not
sure
so
that's what it is. Yeah.
familiar with the Latin.
Well, it was Alberto Rivera who said that the language of Latin is the language of the Antichrist, and I believe that to be 100% correct.
So the Latin translation into English would be plan of studies.
Okay, plan of studies. Okay. All right, so you can never use a translator online, it seems, and get the same result with Latin. It's always
there are several possibilities. If you would like to just simply translate ratio, then it could be a relationship, proportion, affair, and it could also mean the key, the wrench, the code, the spanner. Yeah, so there are several explanations possible. So that is, of course, another hint that there are several means to an end.
Oh, yes. So it's a little complicated. See, it's like a big puzzle we're looking at here. So you decide.
Actually, I would translate it as the order.
The order
of study, how to study.
Thank you. That makes a lot more sense. Thank you for that. All right, so let's continue. This endeavor is the third characteristic. Excuse me, let's go back. Beginning of the paragraph. Since Ultramontanism cannot hope to realize its political ambitions unless it succeeds in controlling the intellectual and religious life of Catholic Christendom, it attempts to extend its sphere of influence in all directions over culture, science, education, literature, and the forms taken by devotion. This endeavor is the third great characteristic of Ultramontanism. Wherever its operations can be traced, they are dominated by the conviction that all strings of independence must be represented, and any advance beyond the stage of immaturity, and nonage checked at the outset. That science must be left free to determine the aims of her investigation, to select and apply her own methods, and to publish the results of her researches without restraint, is a postulate which Ultramontanism either cannot understand or treats with indifference for it regards as strange and incredible the fundamental law governing all scientific research, that there is for it that there is for it no higher aim than the discovery of truth. Bam, right in the face. So isn't that interesting, Michael? This is reminding me of, this is, wow. It's a lot to handle, this article. I apologize, but it's just one of these essential things that, I've wanted to do for years, is to discuss this. My problem is I'm a little dehydrated right now. I need to take a little break and get some water. Okay, so let's see if we can get back into the flow here. I'm going to go back a paragraph here.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll start this one over. Okay. All right. Since Ultramontanism cannot hope to realize its political ambitions unless it succeeds in controlling the intellectual and religious life of Catholic Christendom, it attempts to extend its sphere of influence in all directions over culture, science, education, literature, and in the forms taken by devotion. This endeavor is the third great characteristic of Ultramontanism. Wherever its operations actually can be traced, they are dominated by the conviction that all things of independence must be repressed, and any advance beyond the stage of immaturity and nonage checked at the outset. That science must be left free to determine the aims of her investigation, to select and apply her own methods, and to publish the results of her researches without restraint, is postulate which Ultramontanism either cannot understand or treats with indifference, for it regards as strange and incredible. Strange and incredible, the fundamental law governing all scientific research, that there is for it no higher aim than the discovery of the truth. Now, what I forgot to comment last time, Michael, was that isn't it interesting how it's speaking in feminine form of the church here? That happens in the book of Revelation, where you have the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and the martyrs of Jesus. And I highly recommend, if no one's read Revelation 17 and 18, that you do so now. And you'll see that this is applying that principle. Okay, and we continue. This ignorance of the very nature of science leads to underestimation of the elemental force which science possesses. For only thus can we explain the pertinency with which Ultramontanism, even at the present day, 1911, strives to subject her work to its own censorship and control. So this was right before the Great War, World War I. And it's interesting, Michael. We've lost a lot since then. We've lost a great, great, great deal of things since 1911. I always find it interesting to go back and read these articles, because they teach us what was actually more prominent at that time. Okay, so Yeah, this is our a really big topic here. So this ignorance of the very nature of science leads to underestimation of the elemental force which science possesses, for only thus can we explain the pertinency with which Ultramontanism, even at the present day, strives to subject her work to its own censorship and control. Nor are the criticisms limited to theology alone. Its care extends to philosophy, history, and the natural sciences. Even medicine has not escaped its vigilance, as is proved by the prohibition of certain surgical operations. The development of these efforts may be easily traced from decisions of the Congregation of the Index and the Holy Office in Rome. Ultramontanism, too, labors systematically to bring the whole educational organization under ecclesiastical supervision and guidance, and it manifests the greatest repugnance to allowing the future priest to come into touch with the modern spirit. Hence, the attempts to train its growing manhood in clerically regulated boarding schools and to keep it shut out from the external world in clerical seminaries, even in places where there are universities. Again, it works zealously to bring the elementary schools under the sway of the church, since it regards the training and instruction of childhood as inseparable and holds that the former is essentially the work of the church. It contests the right of the state to compel parents to send their children to the state schools and to the state schools and only to the state schools. In logical sequence to these tenets, it seeks to divorce the school from the state, a proceeding which it terms educational freedom, though the underlying motive is to subordinate the school to the church. In the domain of religion, Ultramontanism tends to foster popular superstitions and to emphasize outward forms as the essence of religious life, for it can only maintain its dominion so long as the common people remain at a low spiritual level. If anyone desires to appreciate the intellectual plane and the power of this ultramontane habit of thought, he will find ample material in the performances of the notorious swindler Leo Taxil under Leo XIII, and in the acceptance of his blasphemous effusions by the highest ranks of clergy. In the fourth place, Ultramontanism is the embodiment of intolerance towards other creeds. The general presupposition involved is that a man cannot be saved except within the Catholic Church. Since, however, on the one hand, in virtue of theory advanced by Pius IX against the Emperor William I of Germany in a letter which has since become famous, every Christian, whether he will whether he will or no, belongs to that church by baptism and is consequently pledged to obey her. And on the other hand, since the state lies under the obligation to place the quote-unquote secular arm at her disposal whenever one of her members wishes to succeed, the most far-reaching consequences result. In the past, this principle led to the erection of the Inquisition, and even at the present day, there exists in the Curia a special congregation charged with its application, see Curia Romana. On the Roman Catholic side, the employment of compulsion against heretics has never been acknowledged as a blunder. And this method of silencing opposition has found champions in the bosom of the Church down to the most recent years. But the development of modern culture has rendered these exploits of an unbridled fanaticism impossible, and no government would consent to enforce the once obligatory sentences of ecclesiastical courts. As a result of this situation, the Catholic condemnation of heresy, though as stringent as ever, in principle, has assumed less dangerous forms for the heretic. Nevertheless, it provided capable, even in the 19th century, of imposing onerous restrictions on the heretic. Excuse me. Nevertheless, it proved capable, even in the 19th century, of imposing erroneous restrictions on the heterodox, and practical exemplifications of this hostile attitude persist to the present day. Yeah, and you can see that in 1914 when World War I broke out, can't we? The embittering influence of Ultramontanism may be further traced in its attitude towards the baptism of non-Catholics, for it seeks to establish the rule that baptism conferred by Protestants is invalid through defect or form or matter or even intention, and that consequently the rite must be readministered. The ritual must be readministered, at least conditionally, to proselytes joining the Roman Church. Finally, ample scope for the display of tolerance or intolerance is found in the mixed marriages between Protestants and Catholics, which, as a result of the modern facilities for intercommunication and the consequent greater mobility of the population, have shown a large increase during the last few decades in Germany, for instance. Here, again, Ultramontanism has done much to aggravate the pernicious feud between two creeds by exacting a promise before marriage from the Roman Catholic party that all the children shall be brought up as members of the Roman Catholic Church. See Marriage Canon Law. A like result has been produced when, in response to ultramontane agitation, interdicts have been placed on churchyards in which non-Catholics have found their last resting place. Lastly, Ultramontanism is the foe of the nationalization of Catholicism. Let me repeat. Lastly, Ultramontanism is the foe of the nationalization of Catholicism. This peculiarity is connected, though not identical, with the above-mentioned tendency towards the Romanization of the Church. Just as in Protestant countries, there has often been an amalgamation of evangelical belief within national feeling to the great gain of both, Catholics demand that Catholicism shall enter into the sphere of their national interests, and that the activities of the Catholic Church should rest on a national basis. These aspirations have been proclaimed with especial emphasis in France, in Germany, and in the United States, but are everywhere met with a blank refusal from the Ultramontane side. For Ultramontanism fears that any infusion of a national element into ecclesiastical life would entail the eventual independence of the people in question from papal control and lead to developments opposed to its papalistic mode of thought. It endeavors, therefore, to undermine all aspirations of this nature, and its own tendency, being essentially international, strives to endure that national sentiment and national interest shall not find overzealous champions among the clergy. The relationship of Ultramontanism to Catholicism is a much disputed problem. The Ultramontane indeed maintains that there is no justification for distinguishing between the two. But the motives underlying this attitude are obvious, for by representing the prosecution of its party political objects, such as a championship of the Catholic Church, Ultramontanism seeks to acquire the support of the official organs of that church, and that the goodwill of all circles interested in her welfare, while at the same time it strives to discredit any attempt at opposition by branding it as an assault on the Orthodox faith. But even within the pale of the Roman Church, this identification provokes emphatic dissent and is repudiated by all who are shocked by the effects of one-sided accentuation of political Catholicism on the inner life of the church, and are reluctant to see the priest playing the part of a political agitator. It was on these grounds that Count May, in January 1904, proposed in the chamber of Bavarian Reichstag that the clergy should be deprived of the suffrage. In Germany, again, the last few years have witnessed a growing aversion from Ultramontanism on the part of those Catholics who cannot reconcile its tenets with their patriotic sentiments and are disinclined to submit to a limitation of their share in the intellectual life of the times, particularly in art, science, and literature. It may be admitted that in many cases, the distinction between Ultramontanism and Catholicism cannot be clearly traced. It is impossible to draw a sharp line of severance between the two, which could be absolutely valid under all circumstances in relation to all questions. For there are many almost imperceptible stages of transition from the one to the other, and for all the principal contentions, of Ultramontanism, analogies may be found in the past history of the Catholic Church. Thus, in the Middle Ages, we find extremely bold pronouncements with respect to the position of the papacy in the universal church, while political Catholicism had its beginnings in antiquity and found very definitive expression, for instance, in the bull Unum Sanctum of Boniface VIII. Again, the attempt to subordinate all intellectual life to ecclesiastical control was a feature of the medieval church, and the fundamental attitude of that church towards heresy was fixed during the same period. But since then, much has been altered both in the church and her secular environment. The state has become independent of the church, legislates on its own sole authority, and has recognized as failing within its own proper sphere the civilizing agencies and social questions formerly reserved for the church. Again, education, science, art, and literature have been secularized. The printing press carries knowledge into every house. The number of illiterates diminishes from year to year in every civilized country, and the clergy are no longer the exclusive propagators of culture, but merely one factor among hundreds of others. Finally, the Roman Catholic Church has long forfeited the privileged position formerly accorded as her due. The days when she was the Christian church are past, and now the civic rights of a man in a modern state are not curtailed through, although he may neglect existence of such any duty. The struggle for religious freedom has suffered no intermission since the beginning of the Reformation. And the result is that today, 1911, its recognition is considered one of the most precious trophies won in the evolution of modern civilization. Nor can these changes be reversed, for they stand in the closest connection and reciprocity one with another, and represent the fruits of centuries of co-cooperation on the part of the European peoples. But Ultramontanism ignores this last page of history and treats it as non-existent, aspiring to the erection of a new order of society similar to that which Rome created, or at least endeavored to create, in the Halcyon days of medievalism. For the justification of this enterprise, it is considered sufficient to point out that several elements of its program once enjoyed validity within the church. But Cyprian of Carthage said long ago, and here we go with more Latin, conciliado sine verilet, can't even read this. I'm not even going to try. And the bar of the fact of previous existence is no argument for the reintroduction of obsolete and antiquated institutions and theories, but under the guise of a restoration on conservative lines. Ultramontanism, notwithstanding the totality different conditions which now obtain, girds itself to the work for an ideal of religion and culture in vogue during the Middle Ages, and at the same time holds itself justified in adopting the extreme point of view with respect to all questions which have been mentioned. Thus, Ultramontanism is not to be conceived as a theological movement, but as the program of a party whose principles are in fundamental opposition to modern culture, modern education, modern tolerance, and the modern state, a party which seeks to carry out its campaign against the society of today, not by bridging the gulf betwixt creed and creed, but by widening it, by awakening religious fanaticism, and by closing the way to peaceful cooperation of Catholics and non-Catholics in the highest tasks of culture and in human civilization. The hierophants of the Ultramontane system are to be found in the Society of Jesus. See Jesuits. In fact, the term Jesuitical and Ultramontane may, in numerous cases, be regarded as equivalent. The origin of Ultramontanism is preceded as conditioned by the collapse of Catholicism in the period of the French Revolution. Pius VI and Pius VII were expelled from Rome, deprived of the Papal States, and banished to France. In that country, the Church almost completely lost her possessions. In Germany, they were at least considerably curtailed. In both, the hierarchical organization was shattered. Excuse me. While the Catholic laity surveyed the catastrophe in complete passivity. But from this severe fall, the Roman Church recovered with its comparative readiness, and the upward movement is contemporaneous with the rise of Ultramontanism. The birth of that system, however, cannot be fixed as a definite event by the day and the hour, nor was it created by any single personality. Rather, it was the product of the first post-revolutionary generation. Neither is it merely fortuitous that the reaction proceeded from France itself, for in no other country had hostility to religion attained such a pitch or assumed such grotesque forms, and consequently in no other country did the yearning for religion manifest itself so unequivocally, when bitter experience had demonstrated the necessity of a return to law and order. And in the other states, and in the other states of Europe, there existed more or less a similar desire for peace and an equally dread of a fresh outbreak of revolutionary violence. In contrast to the struggle for an ideal freedom, which was at first hailed with tempestuous delight, only to reveal itself as a dangerous tyranny, men became conscious of the need for a firmly established authority in the reconstruction of society. After the violent upheaval in the political world during the last few decades, the existent of, as such, increased in value, and the high estimation in which the old regime was now led to a policy of restoration. At the same time, the repression of idealism and sentiment during the period of quote-unquote illumination was amply revenged at the barren age of the reason gave place to Romanticism. These tendencies, in contemporary opinion, favored the renovation of the Roman Catholic Church. But the papacy signalized its reinstallation by restoring the Society of Jesus in 1814 and reestablishing the Index. Even before this, the earliest germs can be traced back to the revolutionary period itself. The movement had begun work in France on the same lines, and as it showed great zeal for the increase of papal authority, it received the support of the Curia. True, the principles of Bonald, Lemaitre, Lamallus, and Lacordaire were not carried through the French church without opposition, but about the year 1850, they had become predominant there. In Germany, Ultramontanism had to contend with great difficulties, for here ecclesiastical affairs were not in so desperate a case that the most drastic remedies possessed the most powerful attraction, while in addition, the clergy were too highly educated to be willing to renounce all scientific work. The result was that a series of violent struggles took place between the old Catholicism and the new Ultramontane species, and it lists Hermes, Bader, and Dollinger, etc. But even here, Ultramontanism gained ground and derived inestimable assistance from the blunders of government after government. Witness the conflict of the Prussian administration with Archbishop Drost-Virsching of Cologne, 1837. Additional impetus was also lent by the revolution of 1848. The growth of Jesuitical influence at Rome, more especially after the return of Pius IX from exile, implied a more definite protection of Ultramontanism by the papacy. The proclamation of the dogma of the Immaculate Conception in 1854 was more than the decision of an old vexed theological problem. It was an act of conformity to a pietistic type, especially represented by the Jesuits. The syllabus of 1864, however, carried with it the recognition of the ultramontane condemnation of all modern culture. See articles Pius IX and Sibelius. Finally, in the Vatican Council, the Jesuits saw another of their favorite theories, that the papal infallibility elevated to the status of a dogma of the Church, see Vatican Council, and infallibility. Ultramontanism, again, through essential adverse forms, all forms of progress, they displayed great dexterity in utilizing the opportunities presented to it by modern life. Where it appeared advisable, it had formed itself into a political party, as for instance the Center Party in Germany. it has shown extreme activity in the creation of a press devoted to its interests and has consolidated its influence by the formation of an extensive league system. In the episcopacy, it has numerous adherents. It has made progress in the universities, and the most learned and theological reviews are conducted in its spirit. Whether the powerful position of this movement within the Roman Catholic Church can be an advantage for that church itself cannot be discussed here. The answer to the problem will mainly depend on the estimate which we form of the Society of Jesus and its whole activity. The outstanding event in the latest history of Ultramontanism is the separation between church and state in France, 1904, by which the Republic has dissolution of the German Reichstag in December of 1906, was a weapon directed against Ultramontanism, and though the elections of 1907 failed to diminish the numbers of the center, they rendered possible the formation of a majority in face of which that system fortified the influence it had previously possessed. And that ends the article and the reading for today.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. I didn't want to interrupt you, but when you told the audience and me that this Ultramontanism is a kind of Jesuitism, I can regard you to the official Wikipedia article of Ultramontanism in English, and they claim that from the 17th century, Ultramontanism became closely associated with the Jesuits. And they claim also a source, a book from a certain Klaus Unterburger, Religion Past and Present, from the year 2006, which is quite recent compared to 1911, I think.
Yeah.
So I don't think that is a big secret, but I think that the people generally would underestimate the influence of the church and state, or the deep state. So I think that people would underestimate it, but in the regard of that article, Ultramontanism, when it comes down to the infallibility, what is it in English?
Infallibility of the Pope, yeah.
Yeah, in 1870 with the First Vatican Council, that makes totally sense. That is just the precursor to the Second Vatican Council. And not only this, but that also they really rule from the Jesuitical standpoint of ratio studiorum, together with the infiltration in all the politicians and science and all the fields. They just rule the state from within, so the deep state. So it actually, all these politicians, as we know, these are just puppets on a string. These are actors. But that article points it out that it is just a Jesuitical method of just influencing the entire world. So that it is just the rule number one, that the Pope can't be criticized or can't be argued with.
Right.
And so that is, of course, a poison to every so-called democracy.
Yes, correct. Well, I found it interesting that this article was written in 1911, far before the decrees on the Inter Mirifica and Miranda Procels, which also reflect the same thing. That that the media should be controlled and owned by the papacy, and that's really the reality of it. And I think that maybe just everyone's just too ashamed to admit this is the last war. This is the great religious war that we are on the precipice of today. and that, we're going to have to endure some very rough times, very possibly in the near future. And that's something we should all consider, doing your due diligence and researching things out, you might come to a little bit different conclusion than everyone else. And,
because these people are just excluding religion from everything, and you see that's the only purpose of these entire channels that we are running, together with other researchers and other Bible-believing Christians and Protestants, that these people would all the time, of course, will be blinded by all the television blah blah and gibberish. Right. Because they don't include religion in it, because they don't have any faith. So when they do not care about anything about the truth, the way and the life, what do you expect?
That's right. That's right. Yep. Again, ignorance is not bliss in this case.
Yeah, where do you read anything in the newspaper, in the articles, in any kind of social media, in smartphones or where else? Where do you read about Ultramontanism, is it?
Yes, correct. Yes. No, you never ever hear about it. It's very rare that you ever hear the term.
Or syllabus of errors. Where do you read anything about this?
No.
Or the first Vatican Council. The people say, "Oh, don't know what happened there because it's 160 years ago, or 150 something."
Sure.
So,
very, very long time ago. Yeah.
So that's why I also thought about how to let people know what's going on. I will start a new series in German, which is simply called Advertisements, because you see in all the advertisements what they try to intend to tell you, to teach you, to how to behave. And it's the thing that they not tell you which is important, not the things that they point out. It's just the things that they leave out, or just they don't tell you on purpose.
Right.
So it's always the things that are hidden from the public eye, behind the curtain, under the veil, beyond the mountain. Ultramontanism. What you don't want to, what you don't need to know, what you should not know, what you should not care about, because you'd only care to work for the papacy.
Mm-hmm.
You only work for the papacy in the industrial countries. You just play the military for the entire world in the United States. So every country in the entire United Nations from the Vatican, they play a certain part in the entire chess game. Or would you like to point it out with the Jesuit Brzezinski, the grand chessboard?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it's not American geopolitical strategy, it's the Vatican's geopolitical strategy.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and that's the thing. We are the military arm of the church, and London's what is it? The Corporation of London. That's
the State of London. Yeah, the City of London Corporation. Yeah.
Yeah, they are the financial arm of the thing. And
officially they are. We do not know if it is correct. You see, maybe they fool us too. But you see that they were been founded by the Knights Templars is quite obvious by their symbolism.
Yeah, it's got to be. It's got to be because do your own research, right, Michael?
Yeah, but then I think you would have also to put the finger also to Switzerland, because Switzerland also had been founded by the Knights Templars, or the remains, and is a papal state, if you would like to say so, from the get-go. So I wouldn't underestimate Switzerland, because nobody talks about Switzerland when it comes down to world wars, when it comes down to financial aspects, apart a bit from the Third Reich gold. But I don't care, because they're just, in the end, you see, Brett, this is not important. Important is that the people know that the Bible is correct when the Bible states that there will be a beast system, a one world government.
Right. Well,
and there can't be any other solution than the papacy.
That's what's going on. Clearly, it's more than obvious, and those that wish to ignore it are not going to, they're not going to be ready for what's coming then. So that's our job, is to be ready, Michael. We got to be ready for what's coming. We can't just kick back and enjoy when there's war on the horizon. It's a really serious life and death kind of event. And, I think if we're biblically sound, we can be in the best position possible. And that's really our goal, isn't it? To be, out there and communicating with others and not be afraid of what the Spirit is trying to tell us in these days through the Scriptures, through what's already been provided for us, because we know in advance, as believers, we know in advance what's coming. And those that don't have faith will see it, and they'll be like, well, why are they doing what they're doing? Well, we're doing what we do because we have faith. And we're telling you, if you don't have faith, you've got some problems to deal with, and you need to deal with them, and you need to repent of your sins, because the devil's got a hold on you. We don't like to see that. It would be great if it was easy. It's not easy. It's not easy to change your ways when you're old. It's hard. Maybe when you're a little younger, it's easier, and that's why, you need to sober up. That's the first thing. Sobriety is much, much, much more important, highly underrated, in my opinion. And, I've had my bout with my problems too. So, hey, we're all living through this experience together, and we need to communicate with one another once in a while, and I really believe that this whole idea of the hierarchy, it's all a part of this Roman Catholic faith, and if you can demolish that and start over again, and pray to God to bring you out of it, that's great. That's really what needs to happen, is that God needs to intervene and show you the way, because this corrupt way of working is not going to get you very far. It's just going to lead to death ultimately, So, I just think it's really important for those that are with Christ and with the gospel to get more active in reading and discussing the Scriptures, because they certainly apply today as much as they've ever applied. And so I've been wanting to get to doing these book readings and stuff, but, I just haven't. So it's really good to touch with you, Michael, on this today, I think, and just get this out on the internet and see how things go. But I really don't know what the future is going to bring, but it just looks really troubling at the moment. I got a call from Daryl Eberhardt today, and he was talking about this, on Veterans Day, 2023 today, and, they're talking about the draft here in America. And how absurd, that they draft people up to like 55 years old, and veterans would have to teach the youngsters how to fight. And but what do you expect when you're the military arm of this, conglomerate? And my question is, how is this going to pan out? I don't think it's going to go over very well. We'll see. But I don't know. I don't like to ignore what everyone's saying, but there's a lot of times when people get it wrong. These predictions can be way off. what is said and what is actually done. Those are two different things. So thanks for joining me, Michael. And I hope to catch up with everyone soon. God willing, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.